Alright, Shadow of the Mad King is going to hit the servers in a couple of days, meaning we get access to the most farmable zone in the entire game. I'm of course talking about the Mad King's Labyrinth, which will be teeming with enemies that drop trick-or-treat bags, which you can sell on the trading post for quite a bit of gold, or you can open them for some goodies and a chance at a super rare infusion. If you've never participated in a lab farm, you're in for a surprise. This is the only activity in the game where you can kill tons of enemies and not be affected by diminishing returns at all. So you could be spending minutes, hours or even days in there and not be penalized at any given time for doing so. This makes it an incredibly popular activity among a lot of players, wherein the biggest challenge will lie. The enemy's HP won't really scale properly with the amount of players in a map. But don't worry, because throughout the years the community has established quite a few ways to let everyone farm while still maximizing the amount of drops at the same time. Generally, you'll have a commander running around in a set route around the map, and everyone will follow them while tagging any enemy they can. Your goal is to tag them, which makes you eligible for loot, but not kill the enemies, so that others get a chance to tag as well. There are two common ways you can achieve this. Either by unequipping your trinkets, which will lower your overall stats and therefore your DPS, or by buying a low-level weapon on the trading post which still allows you to slot in sigils, or both at the same time ideally. It goes without saying that you should also stick to the commander at all times and not deviate from the group. If you don't, you're not only punishing everyone else, but yourself as well actually, as you will be nowhere close to killing the amount of enemies that a group could. As you might already have inferred, you'll want to prepare your build and gear for two things. The first is keeping up with the group, and the second is actually tagging as many enemies as possible. Let's start with what you can do with your gear, as this will apply to every single class in the game, and Secrets of the Obscure actually introduce quite a few new toys for us to play around with. Unless you're a scrapper with permanent super speed, you'll want to have swiftness on you at all times. This can be either achieved through your build, or if you play a class with limited access to swiftness, you could always choose to slot in a sigil of speed in your weapon. If you're playing a Mirage or a Daredevil, you'd actually benefit more from being able to dodge constantly, for which you want to use a sigil of stamina, which will refill your endurance whenever killing an enemy. You should be killing enemies so frequently that a sigil of energy shouldn't be required, but you could always consider having that slotted in the second slot as well. If you're playing a class with limited tagging potential, a Sigil of Fire will help you out greatly, as it'll trigger a blast around any enemy that you critically hit. There is a 5-second cooldown on the sigil though, but it's still a great option for a lot of people. If you don't need any of the sigils I just mentioned, you could always slot in a Sigil of Luck, which has a 75% chance to provide you with a random boon whenever you kill an enemy. And one final consideration could be the Sigil of Purity, which cleanses a condition when you're striking a foe from its flank. This should trigger often, but it isn't guaranteed. With the introduction of Secrets of the Obscure, a lot of value has shifted from your runes to your relics for the lab farm. You could consider having runes that feature concentration or boon duration, so you get maximum benefits from any boons applied to you, or alternatively, you could also consider runes that reduce incoming condition duration should you have limited access to condition cleanses. Both of these are less necessary than they were in the past though. When it comes to the relics, if you don't play a class with permanent super speed, you should consider using a relic of speed. This will put you on par with super speed users outside of combat, and it's the next best thing in combat. Do note that super speed users will still outrun you in combat, but you'll be a lot faster than if you were relying on swiftness alone. Some classes do have other ways of dealing with mobility, which I'll get to in a bit. Relic of the Unseen Invasion could be good for classes with on-demand stealth, but only provides you with 2 seconds of super speed and has a 5-second cooldown, so I wouldn't pay too much gold for that one. There are also a ton of relics that help remove conditions either by using a certain skill, or some of them cleanse an extra condition. These could be a great option if you struggle keeping up due to conditions being applied to you. That's gear out of the way, let's take a look at the individual professions next. There are 3 professions that are notoriously easy to tag on, which are the Mirage, Daredevil and Scrapper. But a lot of other professions will work just fine, some of them do require slightly more effort though. I'll go over the big 3 and one extra profession and share a build in the pinned comment for all of them. Let's start with Mesmers. Their greatsword has a massive 1200 range and Mirages can use their ambush attack to tag multiple enemies at the same time. I posted a Mirage build last week that should work quite well in the Labyrinth actually. And apart from their greatsword, they also have access to a couple of mobility skills such as Blink and Jaunt, which will make sure they will never fall behind the pack. Mantra of Resolve is an excellent condition cleanse, and Sigil of Inspiration will allow you to extend all of your current boons on you. Next is the Daredevil, which is one of the easiest of the classes to tag with thanks to the shortbow. Their auto attack will bounce around enemies, so all you basically need to do is cycle through a pack to make sure you've hit all of them at least once. They also want to make sure to run the Unhindered Combatant Grandmaster trait, which will turn their dodge into a long-range dash that removes any movement impairing condition as well. Much like the Mesmer's Blink ability, they can use Shadow Step to teleport. But make sure to not double tap the skill, as it's going to put you back in the original location if you do so. Signet of Agility is ideal to cleanse conditions and refill endurance for even more dodges, and thieves actually can get credit for mobs tagged by other players when they share their venoms. So make sure if you're playing a Daredevil, you fill any unused utility slot with venom skills. And that brings me to Scrappers, who have permanent super speed when taking the Gyroscopic Acceleration trait. Elixir C is a great condition cleanse should you need it, but the superstar of the build will be the Flamethrower. Despite its auto attack being only 425 range, it hits enemies 10 times in just over 2 seconds. So all you'll want to focus on is keeping up super speed and auto attacking with the Flamethrower while counting all of the gold you're making. As mentioned, I want to shout out one more profession, and that's the Ranger. Soul Beasts merged with an Eagle actually get access to a long range dash, they have a very easy time keeping up swiftness, and the Axe auto attack bounces a couple of times between enemies as well. You might see less of them, but they're actually a pretty good class to tag on as well. As I previously mentioned, stick to the commander at all times to ensure that everyone, including you, gets the maximum amount of loot. Another rule you want to abide by is to not use your mount engage skills. If you fall behind the pack, it's fine to mount up and catch up with everyone else, but make sure you dismount instead of using the mount swan ability, as the mount engage ability will decimate enemies, ruining the fun for everyone. Tagging regular enemies isn't the only activity in the lab. There are legendary bosses that will spawn through a door, commonly referred to as doors in the LFG, as well as Steve, who will hunt you down. If you don't know who Steve is, he's a glowing skeleton with a chainsaw sword, and he's dying to meet you. These bosses pack quite a punch and will take a while to kill, especially on a tagging build with trinkets removed. So it's advisable to set up a second build and gear set to swap to whenever you're clearing doors. You will usually get out of combat before the boss actually spawns, so you'll have time enough to swap templates and speed up killing these bosses considerably. You don't need any special build for this, just pick one from meta battle that's either a DPS build or a boon support DPS build, and that should have you covered. A final thing you might want to do in preparation of farming the Labyrinth is increasing your magic find. I actually already covered this in one of my previous guides, so I'll link that one in the comments. And if you play on the EU servers, you might run into me, as I like doing this for hours on end. Feel free to say hi, and if I don't reply immediately, it's usually cause my cat likes to sleep on my keyboard. If you have any other comments or questions, feel free to ask them down below, and as always, make sure you like and subscribe.